I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world. And that's our job, is to spark somebody else watching us. We might not be the ones, but let's not be selfish.
In 1995, Tupac Shakur sat behind prison bars. Broke, angry, and betrayed. Once hip-hop's most electrifying voice, he was now inmate number 95A1140 at Clinton Correctional Facility. He had no label, no freedom, no clear way out. Then came the phone call. On the other end was a man Tupac barely knew, but who had power, money, and a motive. That man was Suge Knight. In exchange for one signature and a $1.4 million check, Suge didn't just bail Tupac out of prison. He pulled him into a world of chaos, power, and death. This wasn't just a business move. It was a deal that would flip the balance of hip-hop, ignite a coastal war, and lead two icons down a road neither would escape from. This is the real story behind the night Suge Knight bailed out Tupac, and how it changed the course of music history forever. Let's rewind the tape. By early 1995, Tupac Shakur was no longer a superstar. He was an inmate. Convicted of sexual assault and sentenced to up to 4.5 years, he found himself locked inside Clinton Correctional Facility, New York, a maximum security prison surrounded by barbed wire and silence. For a man who once stood center stage with a mic in one hand and millions chanting his name, prison was more than a cage. It was a betrayal. He'd been shot, sued, and now silenced. And the worst part? Tupac felt abandoned by the very industry he helped reshape. Friends stopped calling, labels backed away. The fans still cared, but they couldn't free him. Behind those bars, Tupac started writing like a man possessed. His letters to fans, to journalists, even to strangers were filled with raw energy, distrust, and a growing sense of revenge. He wasn't just planning a return, he was planning to rewrite the rules. Every night, Tupac replayed what led him there. The trial, the media, the fake friends. He didn't see himself as guilty. He saw himself as targeted by the system, by enemies, and by people who'd smiled in his face while planning his downfall. But deep inside that cell, Tupac knew one thing for sure. If he ever got out, he wasn't coming back to be the same man. He'd be louder, harder, more dangerous. All he needed was someone to open the door. While Tupac was locked in a 6x9 cell 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, Suge Knight was living like a king. Death Row Records was unstoppable. The Chronic, Doggy Style, Platinum Plaques, and the streets bowing to its name. But Suge wasn't satisfied. He saw the chaos brewing in hip-hop. East Coast versus West Coast, Dre thinking about leaving, and a cultural war waiting to erupt. He needed a weapon. That weapon was Tupac. Suge saw past the headlines. To him, Tupac wasn't just a rapper. He was a revolutionary with a chip on his shoulder and a story no one else could tell. All he needed was direction, and Death Row would give him that. But first, Suge had to get him out. In a move that stunned the industry, Suge flew to Clinton Correctional Facility and sat face to face with Tupac. He didn't come with sympathy, he came with a contract. $1.4 million in bail money, a seat on the death row throne, and a promise, if you sign with me, you'll never be behind bars again. Tupac was desperate, furious, and running out of options. The deal was risky, but so was staying forgotten. So right there, in a cold prison visiting room, Tupac signed. Death Row Records had just recruited its deadliest soldier. Whether it was loyalty or manipulation, one thing was clear. Tupac was no longer a free man, he just had a bigger cell. And when he walked out of Clinton Correctional a few weeks later, the rap world would never be the same.
And what I heard is Suge got him out of jail with his own money, with Pac's own royalties. That's how he got him out. Right? So Suge was just smart. That motherfucker just smart. He knew exactly what to do, and he smart. You gotta give Suge that. That motherfucker is a smart motherfucker. Well, at least with the music side, right? Because he's had to pay his karma.
October 12th, 1995. Outside Clinton Correctional, reporters gathered behind metal barricades. Fans held up signs. News vans circled. Nobody knew exactly when, but they knew what was coming. And then he stepped out. Tupac Shakur, fresh out of prison, head shaved, death row chain around his neck, walked into the sunlight. Beside him, like a general escorting a weapon of war, was Suge Knight, smiling, silent. The industry froze. This wasn't just a release, it was a power shift. One of hip-hop's most volatile voices had been reborn, and he'd chosen sides. No one expected it. Not Bad Boy, not Interscope, not even Tupac's old friends. With one move, Suge had signed the most explosive artist in the game and turned Death Row into a ticking bomb. The press asked him about prison, about his case, about who he trusted now. Tupac didn't flinch. He thanked Suge. He praised Death Row, and he made it clear the old Tupac was gone. That night, Suge threw a party in Beverly Hills. Tupac walked in like a conqueror. By the next morning, he was in the studio. Freedom had a deadline, and Tupac wasn't wasting a single second.
Check it out. Is it money, you women, the funny beginnings, tragic endings? I can make it still not get enough to spend it.
Tupac didn't ease back into music. He exploded into it. Just hours after walking out of prison, he was back in the booth, pouring out bars like a man possessed. In just 2 weeks, he recorded nearly a dozen tracks. Within months, he would complete the first double album in hip-hop history, All Eyez on Me. The album dropped on February 13th, 1996. It was raw, polished, furious, vulnerable. Everything Tupac had bottled up in prison, unleashed across 27 tracks. It sold 500,000 copies in its first week. Within months, it went 5 times platinum. Tupac was everywhere, on the radio, on magazine covers, in films. Death Row now had 3 of the biggest rap names in the world, Dre, Snoop, and Pac. But behind the platinum plaques and party photos, the tension was brewing. Tupac and Dr. Dre weren't aligned. Dre moved slowly, Pac didn't. Dre wanted peace, Pac wanted vengeance. Suge, he fed off both. In public, they smiled. In private, the walls were cracking. Pac started accusing Dre of being soft, questioning his loyalty, even mocking him in unreleased verses. Some say he wanted Death Row to himself. Others say Suge was steering him toward that. But one thing was certain. With Tupac, Death Row was hotter than ever and closer to collapse than anyone realized. On the surface, they looked like brothers. Tupac and Suge were inseparable, riding in convoys, showing up at clubs in matching suits, throwing money like kings. Suge gave Tupac cars, jewelry, a mansion in Calabasas. He even paid off Pac's legal fees and fed his family while he was locked up. To the public, it looked like loyalty. To some insiders, it looked like ownership. Death Row didn't just sign Tupac, it consumed him. Every show, every dollar, every move had Suge's fingerprints on it. Pac was recording at a breakneck pace, often laying down full songs in a single take. But his masters, they stayed in Suge's vault. His royalties, delayed, his contracts, vague. Still, Pac was loyal, maybe to a fault. He saw Suge as the only one who gave him a chance when no one else would. Even as cracks started forming, he kept writing for Death Row. But something was shifting. Pac was restless. He started talking about building his own label, Machiavelli Records. He hinted at leaving, starting fresh, taking control. And the moment those whispers started, Suge began watching him differently. In Death Row, loyalty was everything, but trust, that was something else entirely.
First of all, I'd like to thank God. Second of all, I'd like to thank my whole entire Death Row family on both sides, you know what I'm saying? I'd like to tell Tupac to keep his guards up. We ride with him. And one other thing I'd like to say, any artists out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
While Tupac was setting fire to every mic in sight, something was going cold inside Death Row. Dr. Dre, the man who built the label's sound, who crafted the Chronic, who gave Death Row its sonic soul, was checking out. Dre hated the direction things were going. The studio used to be a sanctuary. Now it felt like a war zone. Security at every door, guns in the hallways, fights between artists, crew, and sometimes even friends. Suge ran the label like a street empire, and Dre wasn't built for that anymore. Then came the night that made everything worse, the 1995 Source Awards. The room froze. It was the most public shot ever fired at Sean Puffy Combs and Bad Boy Records. East Coast versus West Coast was no longer a whisper. It was war. The crowd at Madison Square Garden booed. Tupac wasn't even there, but he heard the message loud and clear. From that moment, he treated it like a declaration. See, Tupac already believed someone from Bad Boy was behind the 1994 shooting at Quad Studios in New York, the one that left him riddled with bullets, bleeding in a hallway. He survived, but his trust didn't. He thought Biggie knew. He thought Puffy knew. He thought they stood by while he got set up. When Biggie dropped "Who Shot Ya?" a few months later, Tupac took it personally. To him, that wasn't just a track. It was a middle finger, and he responded the only way he knew how, with fire. Hit 'em up. The most brutal diss track in hip-hop history. Pac didn't just diss Biggie, he dragged him, humiliated him, claimed he slept with Faith Evans, and warned everyone in Bad Boy that the war was now official. The air in hip-hop changed overnight. What had started as label drama had now become a street-level conflict with national consequences. And in the middle of it all, Death Row Records was splintering. Dre couldn't take it anymore. He didn't care how many millions they made, the violence, the paranoia, the pressure. It broke him. In early 1996, he walked away from Death Row completely, left behind his studio, his masters, his artists, everything. Tupac saw it as betrayal, Suge saw it as weakness, neither forgave him. And now, with Dre gone and Biggie officially marked as an enemy, Suge Knight doubled down, pouring all his energy into Tupac. Death Row wasn't just a label anymore, it was a weapon, and Tupac was the tip of the blade.
Mind, finger on the trigger, hand on my nine, smoking blunts and skunk and putting holes in punks and on the underground funk pumping out of my trunk.
September 7th, 1996. The air was electric in Las Vegas. Mike Tyson had just knocked out Bruce Seldon in under 2 minutes, and Tupac was front row, draped in Versace, smiling wide. Beside him, as always, was Suge Knight, larger than life, walking like he owned the strip. They moved like royalty, limos, entourage, security. It wasn't just a night out, it was a show of power. Death Row Records had taken over Vegas, but everything changed in an instant. Inside the MGM Grand Lobby, a Death Row affiliate spotted a man named Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip rumored to have snatched a Death Row chain weeks earlier. Tupac didn't hesitate. Security footage shows him throwing the first punch, unleashing a brutal group beatdown in front of a crowd of onlookers and hidden cameras. In that moment, Tupac didn't look like an artist. He looked like a soldier, one who believed in loyalty, no matter the cost. And that cost came fast. Hours later, Tupac and Suge were in a black BMW cruising down Flamingo Road, heading toward Club 662, the after party. It was just after 11 p.m. They stopped at a red light. A white Cadillac pulled up beside them. Then, gunfire. 4 bullets tore into Tupac's chest. One hit his lung, another grazed Suge's head. Suge hit the gas, but it was too late. Blood poured from Tupac's mouth as he tried to breathe. He was rushed to University Medical Center. For 6 days, the world waited. Fans prayed. Reporters camped outside. Death Row insiders closed ranks. Snoop Dogg tried to visit, but the room was heavy with tension. Even he would later say he'd never seen Suge so silent. And then, on September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur was gone. 25 years old. The man who once survived 5 bullets didn't survive this. The irony was cruel. The same man who bailed Tupac out of prison and who promised him the world had been in the car when his life ended. Some say Suge tried to protect him. Others still whisper darker theories. But no matter which version you believe, one fact remains. That Vegas night didn't just take Tupac, it shattered everything.
I remember calling Kadada Jones on the phone, his girlfriend, Quincy Jones' daughter, and she was so optimistic. She said, Pac's gonna make it, Pac's gonna make it.
You know, I knew he was hit. I knew he was hurting. But I don't think I recognized that he was dying.
The world didn't just lose a rapper on September 13, 1996. It lost a movement, a voice, a fire that couldn't be duplicated. And for Death Row, it marked the beginning of the end. In the weeks after Tupac's death, silence swept through the label. There were no new songs, no press conferences, just rumors. Suge Knight, once the loudest man in hip-hop, said almost nothing. He was hospitalized, stitched up, and then quickly pulled into court. The Las Vegas police had questions. So did the FBI, but no one talked. Not Suge, not Death Row's security, not even Tupac's crew. And just like that, the murder case that should have gripped the country faded into the fog. No arrests, no answers, just conspiracies. Some said it was a rival gang. Others blamed East Coast enemies. and a few pointed the finger directly at Suge Knight. Whether coincidence or calculation, no one could say for sure, but the questions never stopped. Why was Tupac out front that night with no bulletproof vest? Why did Suge, who was inches away, walk away with just a scratch? And why, with all that surveillance, did the shooters disappear without a trace? Meanwhile, Death Row unraveled. Dr. Dre was long gone. Snoop Dogg became distant, even paranoid. Lawsuits piled up. And in early 1997, just months after Tupac's murder, Suge Knight was sentenced to prison for a parole violation tied to the MGM Grand Fight. The Kingpin was caged. His empire crumbled. Death Row, once the most feared label in music, became a ghost town, haunted by secrets, blood, and broken trust. Tupac's murder would remain unsolved for decades, but its impact was immediate. Not just on music, but on culture, loyalty, and what it meant to walk the line between art and war. And through it all, one deal still echoed louder than any track: the $1.4 million bailout, the signature that started it all.
Grabbed him with my left hand and lowered him to the pavement, and I could see immediately he had been shot multiple times. There was a lot of blood all over his torso. I knew it was in bad shape. Looked at him and I said, "Who shot you?" He looked at me and he was trying to get his breath together, and I thought I was going to actually get some cooperation. So he looked back at me and he said, "F you." And after he said that, his eyes kind of rolled back, he started to gurgle, and he lost consciousness.
In the end, the $1.4 million wasn't just bail money. It was the price tag on a legend's final chapter. That signature Tupac scrawled in a prison visiting room didn't just buy him freedom, it bought chaos. Because the moment he joined Death Row, the clock started ticking. He recorded 2 albums worth of music in less than a year. He rewrote the rules of hip-hop promotion. He reignited a coast-to-coast feud that reshaped the entire genre. And then, he died before he could take his next step. But for Suge Knight, the deal was something else. It was control, a power play. He didn't just rescue an artist, he locked in a weapon. Tupac lit up Death Row's final year with more energy than any artist before him. But what did he really get in return? Royalties were delayed, masters were controlled, and just when he started whispering about going solo, about launching Machiavelli Records, everything stopped. The deal became a blueprint and a warning. In the years after Tupac's death, artists began to look differently at their contracts, at who really owns the music, at what it means to trust a label that promises loyalty, but operates like a machine. Tupac's posthumous albums would go on to sell millions, but they were curated by others, mixed by strangers, and owned, legally, by the same label that once handed him a pen in a prison booth. To this day, that contract remains one of the most consequential documents in music history, not because of the money, but because of the cost.
This movie is about Tupac actually escaping from the University Medical Center here in Vegas and relocating to New Mexico, getting protection from the Navajo tribe.
I remember when Tupac was getting was going to the radio station when I was an intern, 14, 15 years old, and begging for his music to get played by one of our DJs by the name of Sway, who was on MTV, who has his own syndicated show on Sirius XM. I seen the growth of Tupac.
About 25 years later, because Tupac was an icon, he was beloved, right? He was an extremely talented individual.
Tupac Shakur didn't die in prison, he walked out, smiling, ready. But the deal that gave him freedom might have sealed his fate. Suge Knight didn't just write a check, he lit a fuse. That $1.4 million was more than bail. It was a bet on power, on loyalty, on the idea that Tupac would carry Death Row into a new dynasty. And for a moment, he did. All Eyez on Me became a landmark. Tupac became a myth in real time. But behind the platinum plaques was a man caught in a machine bigger than even he could outrun. The tragedy isn't just how it ended, it's how fast it all moved. In less than a year, Tupac went from inmate to icon to obituary, and the man who bailed him out was sitting beside him when the bullets came. That deal changed everything. It gave us art that still echoes. It gave us questions that still haunt. And it gave us one of the most iconic, complicated chapters in hip-hop history. So now it's your turn. Who gained more from the deal, Tupac or Suge Knight? Drop a comment, hit that like button if you learned something new, and subscribe for more stories that cut deeper than headlines ever did.